Hey folks, Reloading Bench back with you and an update on what I'll call range day for the Diana Bandit. And it was an interesting day, beautiful day out at the range. Couldn't have asked for a more perfect day. Sunny skies, blue skies, no weather issues, no wind either. So I can't blame anything. Uh, Injury day because I have what will be a blister because of how I was dealing with the pistol. You can see where I hold it, and that particular area of rub came from constantly cocking. I probably shot more rounds than I can say. I will say air efficiency, I'll call it air efficiency was excellent, in the sense that I never let it get into the yellow. So I was always within green, and I averaged probably 15 bar on the shooting, and which was interesting because I would say most of the day I did shoot with the sled single shot. When you see some of the examples of the target, you'll see that there was no shortage of shots. I also used the magazine, which I'll pull out here in my little baggie. Got some comments on the magazine. So it was a good day overall. I think the summation of what this pistol, this PCP pistol is you get what you pay for. This was $180, and it's $180 worth of accuracy and functionality. Not unfun. I had a good time. No, I wouldn't call them any negatives other than my blister that will be quite yucky probably tomorrow and the rest of the week. But again, that was just learning the pistol because of how it's shaped and how I was holding it and everything else. So let me start off with the first things I did this morning. I did fill with the compressor and my air filters. I filled my large tank, my 74 cubic foot tank, to 200 bar, so that every fill I got on this 50cc reservoir, air reservoir, was at 20 bar. So I was always shooting at 20 bar, and I would say that every time I shot, after the first few shots, it seemed to just hover right around 15 bar, never really going that low. I never got to the point where I looked at it and I said, "Oh goodness, I'm out of air." So I would say air efficiency was a plus. Functionality, nothing really malfunctioned on the gun. The magazine was, and now I know why it's a teardrop shape. It's a teardrop shape, so once it's in here, you can still see the front sight blade through the rear sight. So that answers that question about the magazine. But once I filled the tank, I went off to the range, and I thought, I've never shot this gun before, so I thought what I would do, and I'll show these online as well while I'm talking so you'll see them a little bit better, but I essentially put out 5 dots. The 2 lower dots were meant for the 18 grain pellet. The 2 upper were meant for the 24, almost 25 grain pellet, and the center dot was for the combination of both. This target was at 30 feet, so 10 yards out. I've never sighted the weapon, and what I did was I started in the lower left-hand corner and worked my way over to see how well it was sighted from the factory versus how well I was shooting. So the first sets of shots were all low. I don't believe I put that there. It could be. Everything was really, really, really low, low and left. And the elevation was very easy to fix, and it got me, within an area of where I wanted to be, but still shooting quite left. In fact, when you look at the elevation, this was seated almost all the way down against this particular component, the actual rear of the sight. So I was surprised at how much elevation the Diana Bandit needed, But once I dialed in elevation, I was within range, and then eventually got over there. Moved on over to the right-hand side, and again noticed I was shooting quite left and still hitting target. And this was all standing, no bench, no seated, no leaning. And I was getting where I wanted to be in terms of my sight picture. Then moved away from here, played with upper left, upper right, center, and I was just annoyed as shit on how left this was shooting, and tried to adjust the sight, the rear sight, for windage, and obviously adjusted too far, and then decided I've got too many holes everywhere, so let me just aim for somewhere center-ish. And again, this was before I adjusted, and this was after adjusting. So when I say adjusting, that's probably the weakest point of this sighting system. Elevation, one screw, up, down. You would think, as in most pistols, or most rear sights on a pistol, turning clockwise turns it right, turning counterclockwise turns it left. Not so with this pistol. This pistol is essentially loosen here as well as loosen here. Adjust by hand, wiggling, tighten, tighten. And that was frustrating because your level of granularity is just challenging. In fact, it was so funny that when I was shooting, and after I would shoot a session, I would tape everything up so that at least I had fresh holes to judge where I was going. And what I thought was kind of interesting was I started in the left on this particular last round of let me get this dialed in, moved into center, saw that my adjustments were obviously way to the right versus way to the left, and that was a previous session. Did some wiggling, and in order to shoot this group where I was the most on target, and these targets are probably the size of a dime at 30 feet, because I just wanted something to see that space. So if you look at what constitutes this level of accuracy, this is what I had to set the sight to. So if you see the center line here, look how far off that is. That is just ridiculously far off. And this is where my comment of you get what you pay for. So, there's a dovetail here. I don't know if it's worth investing, same here, in replacing this rear sight with something else. I'm not a big fan of red dot because to me that's cheating. You're using an electronic assistance versus something that is just your eyes and your skills with sights. What am I looking for? I want to say, and it's probably one that I didn't print, when I was shooting the heavier pellet, the first time I shot the heavier pellet in the upper left, I wasn't even on target. I had aimed here, and I think you can almost see it here and here. With the 25 grain pellet, I was actually aiming right here just to see where it hit, and it was hitting right here that I had taped up. So these sights, this whole rear sight is just absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. I did get it to a point, like I said, where I was reasonably happy. My last round where, okay, I'm in there. It's at 30 feet. It's a big gun. It's a heavy gun with the wood and the long barrel, the breathing and everything else, and shooting at 30 feet to hit a dime. I'm happy with that. Again, you kind of get what you pay for. I was irritated at the blister that's going to pop, or rather had popped, and it's going to get worse. The magazine, I actually prefer shooting this single shot. This magazine was fun to shoot when it worked. And I found out why you can't load it just by doing this and going all the way around and saying, oh, okay, why does the manual have you load it like this? Because when you load it like this, notice there's a spring tension, whereas when you try to load it topside this way, there is nothing. Unless, I guess, maybe if you try, you're even this way you can't load it because that blank doesn't go away. So you have to load it to work correctly from the bottom in order to rotate the different sections of the magazine. And what I found was that if you tried to do a combination of both, like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it only worked for the shot that was in there because it remembers the spring. So it knows that it only has one or two as opposed to all these others that were top loaded and then the last one that was loaded correctly on the bottom. So when this was in there, it worked, and it was nice not to have to load the single shot sled each time, or at least use the sled and do single shot each time. Ideally, you'd want a few of these, especially if you're shooting with a partner, so that the partner could load these up and then you could just shoot. But again, back to the positive, the air efficiency, and I had no problems loading this, airing this back up again. The manual also says to leave air in it so that it seals the O-rings that are inside of it. Never any issues that were air related. My large tank never came off a 200 bar, so I probably loaded this thing with air, reloaded it with air, or regassed it with air maybe 10 times throughout the day. I had 4 20-minute shooting sessions, so 80 minutes of constant shooting with maybe 10-ish reloads, give or take a few. The shots were not terribly bad. I do feel I dialed it in, and I will say the differences between the heavier grain pellet and the lighter grain pellet, the weapon definitely preferred the lighter grain. The heavier grain was much harder to zero in, so if anything, I would go light. I did notice I had shot once in the frame, didn't go through the frame, and I would say that's a combination of the soft lead and the velocity that it's traveling at. So it was a good day to try this out, to find the value. This would be a great beginner PCP pistol for a youngster, better than a BB gun in my opinion, especially with the consistency in the air, or a CO2 type, BB gun being a pump, or a CO2 type propellant that needs to be constantly replaced and a little bit messy and costly. So I do like the consistency with the air usage that the gun displayed, and once I dialed it in, I feel that with the lighter grain pellet, things are pretty good. So that's about it. Don't know if I'm leaving anything off. Again, the one downside would be the rear sight. Everything else I think was worked quite nice. So that's about it for now.